Peace and blessings, family. It's me, Coach 67 Sports TV. Shout out to the awesome and amazing LDBC, Lions Den Broadcasting Community. Special shout out to the General 7A Sports TV. Shout out to Anthony O'Neill Impact Creative Society. Shout out to the Louisiana All American Sports Network, who I've been partnering with. We've been working together. And last but not least, shout out to the greatest university in the world, the Southern University, home of the mighty Jaguars. In this particular live stream, I'm gonna be here for a good time, not a long time. I'm gonna talk about the NBA, just a few real quick topics. Before I get into the live stream, of course, I live here in South Louisiana, and we've been impacted by Hurricane Francine, and for the most part, we didn't have any damage. I didn't have any damage personally. I didn't lose any power or anything. However, I spent the night at my mom's house, and she lost power, and she just had minor damage where she had a tree, small tree, fall against the house, and she had a bigger tree fall in the sugarcane field in her yard, and where the carport area is on the house, all of those shingles blew off. But aside from that, she had no serious and major damage. And the same thing with my sister Kay and her household and all the family members and relatives I've spoken to. For the most part, all is well with everyone. No one had any real damage. No one sustained any real damage. So that in itself was a blessing. And, we blessed. And, all is well. Everything is good in regards to the Hurricane Francine front. For us, we didn't have school yesterday. We didn't have school today, but we'll be back to school tomorrow. However, where she lives, she's no longer teaching anyway. She serves every once in a while. But they don't have school tomorrow in her area, but we have school tomorrow, where I am. So much for that. But in terms of the topics for today's NBA live stream, I'm going to talk about MJ versus LeBron, the Dream Team versus the current U.S. Olympic men's basketball team. Anthony Edwards in his comments about, players from the past basically saying MJ was the only skilled player. And Swaggy P and Gil's Arenas argument about the 01 and 02 Lakers versus the 17 and 18 Golden State Warriors. Major shout out to Autism Boy Cottage 81. Sup, coach? Salute, coach. And I was able to catch and check out a couple of his live streams. He talked about Mike Woodson, basically was overrated as a coach. And I'm not gonna lie, he has some very interesting points and interesting topics. In regards to the wrench thing, I've been having some issues with my computer. I tried to wrench you up, but I just couldn't give out wrenches in general. But my brother Jared 11 Green, evidently he had a similar issue, so supposedly he was supposed to walk me through it. When he and I, the next episode we have of HBCU Fanatics. That was the reason why we didn't have HBCU Fanatics last night, because of Hurricane Francine. The next time, Autism Board, next time we have our live stream HBCU Fanatics, I'll be certain to get with him and I'll rent you up. But let's get into the show real quick. The first topic, some people probably say it should be the last topic, but, I'm going to get it out the way right away. MJ versus LeBron. Now, many people have, varying arguments, and when it comes to the MJ versus LeBron topic, of course, now LeBron is the all-time scoring leader. To me, I really don't factor that into the argument, because that's more of a longevity award in terms of being all-time leading scorer in the NBA. Prior to that was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who played in the NBA for a long time, even when I was a kid. I'm like, wow, this dude still playing. So for that time, he was an anomaly, because, modern medicine wasn't what it is today. It wasn't, that in those days. And in addition to that, nutrition, and just technology in general wasn't what it was in those days, what it is today. So Kareem was a phenom, and of course he had the patented sky hook. That's one of the shots I use to this day. And all the players on my team was like, "Man, would you get that shot from like the 1800s?" And I'm like, "That's all right. You can't stop it." So Kareem, he was a legend, and he was all-time leading scorer till LeBron surpassed him. But more than anything, whether we talking about Kareem or we talking about LeBron, that's a longevity award more than anything. But in terms of like my greatest players of all time, I have MJ number one, I have Kobe number two, I have LeBron number three. And the reason why I have it that way, I'm not gonna get into stats or analytics or anything like that. To me, it's strictly about just being the beast and having a dog mindset. Now, I don't get it twisted. The one thing I don't like about these arguments when you pit modern day players against players of yesteryear, it's like one side has to put down the other side to elevate themselves. I don't like that aspect of it. Me, I'm the type of person I like to see people thrive and do well and happy and be successful. So in my mind, if you're a jealous individual, if you're an envious individual, if you're a hater, I don't have nothing to do with you, because when it's my turn, are you going to be jealous of me or you going to hate on me? I don't like that. So to me, I never been the kind of dude that believes in dirty macking or just believes in, dimming someone else's light so my light can shine brighter. I feel like I shouldn't have to put anyone else down to elevate myself. And that's just, my opinion of it. So when I hear players of yesteryear talk about the current generation, I feel like they shouldn't have to down the current generation to elevate themselves and vice versa. I feel like the generation today shouldn't have to down the generation of yesteryear to elevate themselves. And salute to my brother Jared Levin Green. Just mentioned you, bro, and basically I was saying the reason why we didn't have HBCU fanatics because of Hurricane Francine, hit last night, well, hit yesterday in general. But all is well, with myself, I didn't lose any electricity. I spent the night at mom's house, so being there, she had no electricity. That's why we couldn't do the show. But except for a little minor damage, she really didn't have any damage. Everything is good with Kay and her family. So, all is well. But back to what I was saying. So I don't like when, one side or the other downs the other side to elevate themselves. But in terms of the MJ versus Kobe versus LeBron discussion, I think, too many instances when there's a GOAT conversation, when they talk about MJ versus LeBron, I'm going to be truthful. I have Kobe over LeBron, me personally. And more than anything, it comes down to mindset and mentality. And I think LeBron is a great player, and Kobe's a great player also. But truthfully speaking, when we talk about, Kobe being a carbon copy of MJ, we talking about, MJ on the second leg of those back-to-back, second leg of the three-peat. We're not talking about, MJ in the mid to late 80s, early 90s. That MJ from an athletic standpoint, he was in a whole another stratosphere compared to Kobe. I don't think Kobe physically could match up to that version of MJ. I'm talking about MJ when MJ lost a couple steps and MJ had to revert more to the post game, but his basketball IQ was on a whole nother level, because he had to compensate for the physical tools and attributes that he no longer had from an athleticism standpoint. Even, the Wizards version of MJ, I think that version of MJ was underrated too, because most players at his age can get out and average like 22 points at that stage in their career. So MJ was a great player, and Kobe was a great player. I felt like, that second three-peat version of MJ, I felt like Kobe was a carbon copy and a clone of that particular player. But when it comes to, MJ and Kobe versus LeBron, I just feel like LeBron don't have that dog man mentality, that mindset. If you look at, I mean, don't get me wrong, he had some, some amazing games. When I think of LeBron, the game that I think of the most, that was kind of like his coming out party. The same way, Shaq falling out against the Indiana Pacers was Kobe's coming out party. I felt like LeBron's coming out party when he had like 25 straight points against the Detroit Pistons. We talking about the Pistons that had won the NBA championship. Even though that version of the Pistons, they didn't have Ben Wallace. I think that defensively they weren't as good as the team of the year or two prior. But nevertheless, it still was an impressive feat that he was able to score 25 straight points against that team in a big game. So I think people kind of downplay LeBron's greatness to elevate MJ. But I feel like you don't have to downplay LeBron's greatness. LeBron is a great player in itself. I think, some of the things that I kind of take away points of when it comes to LeBron, I feel like when it comes to LeBron, people talk about how he make players around him better. And I'm not saying that's not the case, but I think that point is overstated because if you look at, in Miami, like Chris Bosh had to sacrifice tremendously for the Heatles to become the team that they were. I mean, if you look at the Raptors version of Chris Bosh, and you look at, the 06 version of Dwayne Wade, he was hurt, so he lost a couple steps. And Chris Bosh, he had to greatly sacrifice his game to elevate LeBron. So LeBron didn't make Chris Bosh better. Chris Bosh sacrificing and being more of a team player is what elevated the Heatles to that championship caliber team. And then, in addition to that, when it comes to not just that, but if you look at, the Lakers, when Russell Westbrook was on the team with them, it was almost like he didn't make Russ better. And I mean, I know so many people are like, well, Westbrook and LeBron's game don't complement each other. And that's cool, and I understand that. But he didn't make Westbrook better, even in Cleveland. I really didn't feel like he made Kevin Love better because Kevin Love had to sacrifice so much to make the Cavaliers a championship caliber team also. So if you look at those examples of Chris Bosh, Kevin Love, Russell Westbrook, he didn't make those players better. Those players had to sacrifice and become diminished version of themselves to elevate LeBron. So I'm not saying LeBron didn't make teammates better. I think he kind of really flourished when you put shooters and 3-and-D players around him more than anything. So that whole LeBron versus MJ comparison, I don't think is a even comparison in terms of their game because their game is different. Honestly, I think LeBron is a little bit more than he's more of a Magic type player. But even with that being said, I don't think he makes the players around him better the degree Magic did. If you look at Magic with his first year in the league with the Lakers winning the NBA championship, he elevated the players around him, tremendously. And I think that portion of LeBron's game is overstated. But more than anything, I think the reason why I put MJ and Kobe over LeBron is the fact that I just feel like, they were both beasts and they have dog mindsets and mentalities. MJ was just a savage. I mean, he wouldn't do whatever it takes to win within the parameters of the game. And I think that's the reason why he's better than LeBron. I think that's why him and both Kobe is better than LeBron. Now, don't get me wrong. Off the court, some of the stories they told about MJ like the story a millionaire told about him. You know, I'm from South Louisiana, small town. I believe in treating people the way I want to be treated. And you know that whole story of millionaire, you know him, you know winning the auction and getting the jersey, and MJ would take a picture with him and whoop the woo. You know that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And you know some of the stories they told about Kobe, how you know he would talk to Smush Parker and that type of thing. That rubbed me the wrong way about Kobe. You know the story they told about MJ and Steve Kerr, and I ain't gonna lie, like a lot of the things they told about MJ, like in the locker room and those type of things, to me kind of came across as a bullet. But we just talking about strictly on the court. I feel like MJ and Kobe, they were willing to do whatever it took to win within the framework of the game. And I think they just from a mindset standpoint, I felt like LeBron was more passive. You know, and when they talk about, you know, LeBron, you know, late game scenarios at the end of the game type situations, he's driving to the goal. If he has a clear path to the goal, instead of him driving and taking the layup or the shot or whatever, you know, he won't kick it because it's the right basketball player. To me, I think it's a cop out. I think that's his way of basically, hey, if I kick you this pass and you miss the shot, to me, it's kind of a way of him deflecting blame as opposed to, you know, taking accountability and ownership. Like, hey, we gonna win. I'm gonna carry us to this victory, and if we lose, I'm willing to take the blame for it also. So at the end of the day, I think that's what it is when it comes to LeBron. You know, I feel like he's a great player, but I just don't think he has that same mindset and mentality that MJ had and that Kobe had in their prime and in their heyday. So that's why I give, you know, not based on stats or analytics, because, you know, we could do the analytics aspect of it all day. You know, the championships, you know, MJ's 6 to LeBron's 4. To me, I feel like that's just, you know, barbershop conversations. You know, it's just good dialogue. But I think at the end of the day, I think mindset is why I elevate MJ and Kobe over LeBron. And that's just my personal opinion. The next topic is the Dream Team versus the current U.S. Olympic team. And, you know, all of these individuals like Colin Cowherd and Draymond Green and on and on and on, these individuals basically saying that the current U.S. men's Olympic basketball team will beat the Dream Team. To me, that is absolutely ridiculous. I think the current version of the Dream Team, I think they had great players on this team. You know, you had, of course, LeBron, you had Steph, you had KD, you had Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, I felt like the way Steve Kerr played the entire situation, I felt like that was trash, you know, from a coaching standpoint. But at the end of the day, you compare this team to the 92 Dream Team, I'm definitely giving a competitive advantage to the 92 Dream Team. If it was a one-game scenario, I'd say the Dream Team probably wins by about anywhere between 10 and 14 points. In a 7-game series, I think if you put the Dream Team against the current version of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, I would say the Dream Team would probably beat them 4 games to 1, maybe 4 games to 2. And, you know, everybody will say, well, who would you put on LeBron? Who would you put on KD? Who would you put on Steph? From a defensive standpoint, whoever I would want to, like, slow down, I would put Scottie Pippen on that particular individual right out the gate. Because, you know, Scottie Pippen, he was able to pick up, you know, players on the opposing team 94 feet, harass them. Just think about it. He was able to pick up Magic Johnson 94 feet, Mark Jackson 94 feet. So, you know, Scottie Pippen was an excellent defensive player. And, you know, when they talk about, you wouldn't be to put Scottie Pippen on KD, you know, just watching KD early in his career, I mean, at one point, I remember, you know, games in the playoffs when they would play against the Clippers when he was with the OKC. They had Chris Paul on him, like harassing him. And don't get me wrong, eventually KD elevated his game, and that was a bad idea at a certain point. There were times when when I was a Pelicans fan, them having Drew Holiday on him and just get all up in him, and by that point, of course, his game had elevated. He was able to know how to deal with the physical, aggressive defensive player with that pressure. And then when he was with the Nets, just seeing the way defensively Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown was able to be physical with him. I think Scottie Pippen will cause KD a lot of problems defensively. And then, of course, I think the $1 million question is, who would the U.S. men's Olympic team, the current version, who would they put on MJ? Because Devin Booker wouldn't be able to stick him, Anthony Edwards, Derek White, Drew Holiday. None of those guys will be able to stick MJ. So who you going to put on them at that point? And, from a matchup standpoint, I think that people try to cherry pick. But, when they're talking, the way they make it sound like great players like Patrick Ewing and Clyde the Glide Drexler were scrubs. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is asinine. This is ridiculous. Like, Clyde the Glide Drexler was a dog. Patrick Ewing was a dog. And for people nowadays to make it sound like these great players were scrubs, man, you can miss me with that. Like, man, these players were great players. And I think more than anything, when it comes to the current U.S. men's Olympic team versus the Dream Team, salute to my brother Vince, Louisiana all day, LDBC business for sure. But when it comes to, modern NBA and the modern U.S. men's Olympic team versus the Dream Team, I think that the difference that separates them is if you look at the, offense in that day, it was more player movement and ball movement. Like nowadays, it's a lot of high pick and roll, a lot of ISO basketball. Whereas in that day and age, it was 5-man offense. It was a lot of player movement, ball movement. You had to have a high basketball IQ. You had to be more efficient offensively. So I think those things are things that people don't take into consideration. And in addition to that, from a coaching standpoint, I definitely would trust, may rest in peace, I would trust Chuck Daly much more than I would trust Steve Kerr in this type of environment. So I think Chuck Daly gives, U.S. Dream Team, the 92 Dream Team, the advantage of the current men's U.S. Olympic team. And in addition to that, I think the way they played, offensively, with it being more player movement and ball movement, you can't defensively, you just can't say, well, we're going to load up and we're going to try to stop MJ. We're going to load up and try to stop, I don't know, like David Robinson and Patrick Ewing. And, that's another thing that they really don't bring up. I mean, the only real legitimate center that you have on this current version of the U.S. men's Olympic team is Joel Embiid. So, Colin Cowherd was like, well, who's going to stick Anthony Davis? No. Who's going to stick Patrick Ewing and David Robinson? Because once you take Joel Embiid out the game, then what? Who's going to stick David Robinson? Who's going to stick Patrick Ewing? And even if you look at from a power forward standpoint, man, I mean, you talk about Bam and AD, but Bam and AD, they played well together. But, you got players like, especially that version of Charles Barkley, man. Which one of those two going to stick him? Which one of those two going to stick Karl Malone? So, on the inside, the U.S. men's Olympic team would be at a serious disadvantage compared to the Dream Team. And additionally, the way they played in terms of the player movement, the ball movement, man, I think the 92 Dream Team would have the huge competitive advantage. And even if you look at the way they struggled against Serbia, man, the Joker gave them boys the blues. Just think about what David Robinson and Patrick Ewing would be able to do to them if, the Joker, and don't get me wrong, I know the Joker is great, but if you compare him to Biggs in that day and age, when people talk about the Joker is offensively one of the top 5 greatest centers of all time, and that is asinine in my opinion. That's ridiculous. Even if you look at like his post game compared to like a Akeem Olajuwon or David Robinson, Man, brother, the Joker would not be not only top 5 offensive center, he wouldn't be a top 5 center in that era, in like the 90s to 2000s. I mean, when you consider, Shaq and Dream and David Robinson. Come on, man. That's just my personal opinion, And so if the Joker was able to give those boys the fits that he gave them, man, what would they do with Patrick Ewing and David Robinson and Karl Malone and Charles Barkley? Man, they would have their way with the current version of the U.S. men's Olympic team. And like I said, just to kind of cap it off, I mean, with MJ, man, come on, man, you can't put Anthony Edwards on him because he would be too small. Drew Holiday and Derek White wouldn't be sticking. Steph Curry shouldn't even look in his direction. Devin Booker wouldn't be able to stick in. So what would the current version of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team do? And like I say, I think the dream team is probably 10 to 14 points better than the current version of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team. And additionally, I also think that if you put them in a 7-game series, this current version of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, max they will be able to get 2 games, max, in my humble opinion. So the first 2 topics, of course, we talked about MJ versus LeBron. We talked about the dream team versus the current version of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team. And, salute to the brother, Jay Barr. Salute, bro. Next, Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards talking about, the only, him saying what he's saying is kind of like for my LDBC brethren, when Tank Davis, when they asked him about Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and he was like, yeah, I heard of him, but I never actually watched him fight. And I'm thinking to myself, are you serious? You are a current champion, multi-division champion, and you don't know who Marvelous Marvin Hagler is? Man, in our day and our time, we would be embarrassed to make that comment. And for them to ask Anthony Edwards, what he thought about, players in the 90s to 2000s. I'm just kind of paraphrasing both the question and his response. And basically what he was saying is, I didn't watch it back in the day, but, outside of MJ, like, he was the only player in that particular day and time that was skilled. And to me, that's asinine. That's extremely disrespectful to players like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Isaiah Thomas and George Gervin and Clyde the Glide Drexler and Reggie Miller and Mitch Richmond, Dominique Wilkins. Man, I can literally just go on and on and on. Legendary, great players, top 75 all-time players, top 50 of all-time players. And, multiple players had rebuttals. Dominique Wilkins has been responding lately. Magic Johnson had a response. And then even I think the best response and rebuttal was Kevin Garnett's response. And basically, when he said that players in that day and age weren't skilled, I think basically what he meant is, from an athleticism standpoint, like players weren't on the same level athletically as MJ, because from an athletic standpoint, MJ was like head and shoulders above everybody else, especially like in the late 80s, early 90s. So I think he meant that. And in addition to that, I think he was also talking about, from a shooting standpoint and from a ball handling standpoint. But I think he left out so many other facets of the game in terms of defensively, from a rebounding standpoint. Just imagine if you took someone like a Dennis Rodman and you dropped him in today's day and age. Man, he probably would average about 20 boards a game. So I think there's so many components that he left out. But when you look at it from a ball handling standpoint, MJ wasn't – he didn't have the kind of handles that somebody like Isaiah Thomas had, or, maybe like Tim Hardaway. Or from a shooting standpoint, he couldn't shoot like a Larry Bird or Reggie Miller or Mitch Richmond. He couldn't shoot on the same level of those guys. So I think he's purely talking about from an athleticism standpoint. And if he didn't watch in that day and age, he should have just kept his mouth shut and say like, hey, I didn't watch the game in that day and time, so I don't know. And that's the thing about, I noticed about a lot of these modern players, even just the players that play on the basketball team in my PE class, you ask them who in the game of basketball, they don't even know. So I think in the day and age, like they are not as educated as players in our generation had to be. You have to know the history of the game, and you have to know about players of yesteryear. And it was a ridiculous comment that Anthony Edwards made, and I think Kevin Garnett had the best response to it. And basically, what he was saying is, like, in terms of James Harden, I'm paraphrasing what KG said, the big ticket. But what he was saying is you couldn't get to a triple step back in that day and age because defensively, they would be all over you because the rules defensively nowadays compared to what it was in the 80s and 90s. Of course, if you look at the 80s with the bad boy Pistons, with the Lakers, with the Celtics, and from a marketing standpoint, people don't realize that they made, they villainized the Detroit Pistons. Because if you look at like those games between the Lakers and the Celtics, those were the real physical, aggressive games, where people were like literally trying to clothesline each other and things of that nature. So I think the Detroit Pistons were villainized, when they won those back-to-back championships. But you were able to hand check, you were able to forearm check. And defensively, you being able to, like, especially if you were a strong defensive player, you were able to, like, herd and guide places that you wanted them to be on the court. So that's why, like, a team like the Pistons had the Jordan rules, because they knew where MJ wanted to go. He wanted to go right more than anything. Even though players were like, oh, man, MJ couldn't go left, and they showed a whole montage of MJ going left and doing phenomenal things. Of course, he had to, elevate his game to that point. But the point I'm trying to make is defensively, it was a lot tougher to get the points and do things offensively compared to today's day and age. And what KG was saying was David Stern, initially in the 80s, he cleaned up the dirty play, going into the 90s because, people felt like it mucked up and it dirtied up the game. And, after a certain point, they got rid of, basically they brought in the zone because people don't realize, like me and the female basketball coach, we were talking like to our PE class, and, people don't realize in that day and age, if you took a player like, I'm going to say Dr. J. Julius Erving, if I put him on the right side of the court and the other four offensive players stand on the left side of the court in a straight line, people don't realize that you couldn't play zone against that type of offensive set. Basically, what you had to do was defensively, you could play help side and you could go over and help, but just like you had illegal defense back then where you couldn't be in the lane more than 3 seconds defensively, it was the same way then. So that's why when they ISO'd, it was so much more freedom, in terms of getting to the basket. But offensively, you wasn't going to win an NBA championship by just ISOing every play the way they do in the day and age. They don't understand that. So defensively, you were able to forearm check and hand check and those type of things. So, after a certain point, David Stern, he got rid of that to make the game more free-flowing and more of a high-scoring game. And then in addition to that, like I said, they brought in the zone because of international play. So people don't realize it's the same league, but it's a completely different game in terms of rules. And like KZ was saying, offensively, you had to be more efficient because it was more player movement, more ball movement. And you couldn't just jack up threes back then the way you do now because, from a coaching standpoint, coaches wouldn't let you shoot, all those three-point shots because, when Ant-Man said that players back then were more skilled, I think he's talking about a shooting component of it. But they put up, I was able to pull up the analytics, and there's only like a 2 percentage points, like shooting difference between then and now. So essentially, they're shooting practically the same percentage. But the only difference is because of the Golden State Warriors, from a coaching standpoint, I say this all the time. I think the worst thing that happened in the NBA was the Golden State Warriors winning the NBA championship is because, if you look in the community settings on my YouTube page, Funny Mike's nephew, Jay, was my starting point guard at one point. And the only game we won that year, we played against this team called South Baton Rouge Charter. And basically, you know, me and the coach standing on the sideline, like literally during the game. He was like, man, coach, y'all live and die by the 3-ball. And I'm like, coach, I'm not telling these boys to shoot these threes. They're just jacking them up. And I keep yelling at them, fussing at them, pulling them out the game. But they don't understand, you know, everybody trying to be like Steph and Clay. But you don't realize from a genetic standpoint, Michael Thompson played in the NBA for years, and Dale Curry played in the NBA for years. And not only that, from a financial standpoint, the resources that Clay and Steph had at their disposal, you can't shoot the same way these boys shoot. And, you know, since most leagues, the NBA being no different, is a copycat league, since they had so much success shooting 3-ball, you got a lot of other teams just jacking up threes where you had players that couldn't even shoot, like Josh Smith. He was just jack up threes. So it was just a different game, and people don't understand that the game in that day and time compared to today's game is just a different game. And I don't understand why players that play in the NBA in today's day and age, like Anthony Edwards, don't understand that. You know, you have a lot more freedom of movement, so that's why you're able to score, you know, so many more points offensively. And in that day and age, you know, the closer you want to shoot the ball as close to the rim as you could get. A layup and a dunk being the best thing you could do. But, you know, just jacking up threes just for the sake of jacking up threes, even though from a team standpoint, your team is not that skilled at shooting 3-point shots. I mean, it's crazy. It's asinine. It's ridiculous. And basically, they don't understand the evolution of the game, and they don't understand, you know, how much more different the game was back then than it is now. So even though it's the same league, it's a different game. And I think Anthony Edwards and a lot of players don't understand that. And that concludes that topic. But my final point and my final topic is basically on Gil's Arena, Swaggy P was talking to Kmart and Gil about the 17-18 Golden State Warriors being the greatest team of all time. And, you know, Kmart, because when he was with the New Jersey Nets, they played against the Lakers in the finals. And he was like, you know, what about those 01 and 02 Laker teams? And basically Swaggy P was like, you know, basically two, you know, we'll beat them in terms of threes versus twos. And the thing they was trying to get Swaggy P to understand, which he another one, just like Ant-Man, they don't understand that Shaquille O'Neal in that day and age, he was such a force of nature offensively. They had, if you look at that 17-18 version of the Golden State Warriors, they had nobody on that team defensively that was even sticking. Whether we talking about JaVale McGee, whether we talking about Draymond Green, whether we talking about, you know, me being a Hornets and Pelicans fan, you know, David West, that was like a, you know, David West in the twilight of his career. He wasn't the same David West he was here with the Hornets, with the Crescent City connection with him, Chris Paul, and Tyson Chandler. He wasn't that guy anymore. So if you just look at the bigs they would be able to throw at Shaq, and basically what they were saying is like, man, dude, y'all bigs will literally fire out the game in one half. And, you know, Swaggy P was like, all right, who will be able to, on that team, who will be able to stick Steph? Who will be able to stick KD? Who will be able to stick Clay? And he was like, yeah, you know, Kobe would have to stick Clay. And it was explained to him, no. The thing they was trying to get him to understand is like a layup or a dunk is as close to 100% as you can get. Whereas all of those 3-point shots, Steph, Clay, and KD would be shooting, all of those would be contested shots. And your whole argument of the 3 beat the 2, it really is an invalid argument at that point, because all of the shots Shaq would get would be dunks and layups. And as soon as you get into the penalty, now Kobe, with his dog mindset, him being the beast that he was just going to beast mode. Y'all already in foul trouble. He's going to consistently attack. And basically, y'all done. And, you know, you thinking you could put Andre Iguodala on him. You think you could put Klay Thompson on him. They was like, man, Kobe would just slaughter both of those boys. And in addition to that, you also have to deal with the fact that defensively, Kobe would stick Andre Iguodala, and he would help side like crazy. And whether you put Rick Fox or Robert Horry on Draymond Green, they would help side like crazy off of him too. So now, in terms of all of those threes Steph and Clay and KD hitting or were shooting at the time, all those shots gonna be heavily contested. And now, essentially, what the Lakers will do defensively is force Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green to beat him. And that's the thing I don't think Swaggy P understood. And that's why I say at the end of the day, it's like these modern NBA players, they don't understand that it was a different league in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s than it is now. And, you know, it was a lot more ball movement, player movement. You had to be more efficient offensively in terms of shot selection. You want to shoot as many shots as close to the basket as you possibly could. And I don't think they understood that in terms of, like, it's a different game today than it was that day and age. You know, and the fact that, you know, somebody like Anthony Edwards, you know, going back to the previous topic, you know, said he didn't watch the game, but MJ was the only skilled player in that day and age. You know, it was just an ignorant comment. You know, just the same way Tank Davis saying that, you know, yeah, I heard of Marvelous Marvin Hagler, but I actually never got to watch him fight. And I'm like, dude, you're a multi-division world champion, and you never watched Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Like, in many people's estimation, arguably the greatest middleweight of all time. It's like, come on, man. Like, it's the fact that you're a world champion, you shouldn't even let those words come out your mouth. But that's the end of this particular live stream. Later on today, I'm going to have my pregame analysis of the Boombox Classic of my Southern University Jaguars going to Jackson to play against Jackson State in the Boombox Classic. So check out for that. Also, you know, go check out my brother Jared 11 Green Southern Baller Show Sundays at 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Also, go check out my brother Brent Fox with his show It's Just Me. Typically, he does a live stream on maybe Thursdays or Fridays. Also, tonight at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern Time, my brother Cadillac Red and myself, Supreme Beast After Hours, the Coach's Playbook. Y'all be certain to come and check it out. That's it for this live stream. You know, so salute to the General 7A Sports TV and the entire LDBC family. Shout out to everybody that came through and showed love and support. My brother Vince, Autism Boy, Jay Barr, Jared 11 Green. Salute to everybody that came through that showed some love. I appreciate y'all to the highest. Appreciate y'all to the fullest. Catch y'all on the rebound. Y'all have a blessed, phenomenal evening. Hopefully everyone within the sound of my voice that's here in Louisiana, you know, hopefully y'all are all safe from Hurricane Francine. Catch y'all on the rebound. Peace and blessings.